Chapter 3. It was with some misgivings that I learned that Mr. Gurdjieff was going to make a visit to Chicago during the winter of 1932. Even now, some 30 years later, and with the aid of hindsight, I find it difficult to understand why I did not want to see him. Part of my feeling was unquestionably due to the fact that I had come to believe that I had probably made a mistake when I left the Priory in 1929. I felt that I was not, because of my departure, a loyal or faithful follower. In addition, while I had some genuine interest in his writing and real affection for Gurdjieff as a man, my association with the Chicago group had made me question the validity of his work in all its aspects. I was still looking for some proof, some quality in the behavior of his followers that would convince me that he was something more than a powerful human being who was able to mesmerize a good many individuals at will. My interest in his writing was, at that time, nothing more than curiosity concerning his particular speculations and criticisms of mankind. It was not a wholehearted agreement with his point of view. I did see him, but not without a good deal of resistance on my part. In fact, if I had not received a message from him asking me to come to see him, I would not have seen him at all. As it was, the meeting was not very satisfactory to me. I went with a small group of his followers to meet him at a restaurant in downtown Chicago. It was a noisy place with music and dancing, and after he had greeted me affectionately, we proceeded to sit in this din without any further exchange. The other people talked to him incessantly, mostly about uninteresting and to me unimportant personal problems, and for a long time my only participation in the proceedings was that he sent me on several errands: to buy cigarettes for him, to buy some special kind of cheese, to telephone some particular group member to come to meet him, etc. Finally, when there was a lull in the general conversation, Gurdjieff turned to me, indicated the couples dancing on the crowded dance floor, and asked me if I realized that dancing was a very interesting and almost perfect example of what he called titillation. I felt that I understood what he meant, i.e., waste, and so on. He then asked me if I knew what titillation was: social masturbation, which, mostly because of my age, embarrassed me. I managed to say that I agreed with this, and he then said that it was time for me to look objectively at the life of people, to observe human manifestations, and to try to understand the difference between genuine, essential, normal human behavior and titillation or masturbation. He added that while he had used this example of dancing, I should learn to recognize this masturbation in other spheres of human activity. As an example, he said that people frequently learn very quickly to turn anything, even their religion and their so-called serious beliefs, into something meaningless, into some meaningless form of titillation. I made some reference to his statement of many years before that much of mankind was inevitably destined to become nothing more than fertilizer, and he was very pleased that I had remembered that conversation. He said, however, that he had been studying the American language recently and had learned many new and useful terms, that he now wanted to change the term fertilizer to shit, because the latter word was a real word, an honestly expressive word that gave the proper flavor of that particular human condition. He went on to say that I, like most young people, particularly Americans, always looked at the world upside down. For example, I assumed that anyone I met was good, honest, upright, etc., etc., and only learned the truth about people through disillusion. This attitude was a long, slow, and improper process. You must learn to look right side up, he said. Every person you see, including yourself, is shit. You learn this, and then when you find something good in such shit people, some possibility not to be shit, you will have two things. You will feel good inside when you learn this person better than you think, and you will also have made proper observation. Just so, when you can observe self, if you already think self is all shit, then when see something good in self, will be able to recognize at once and will also feel joy. Important that you think about this. The immediate association in my mind was with the Chicago group members, and it did have the effect of changing my attitude about and towards them. Instead of feeling disappointment with them for not manifesting some sort of worthiness because of their association with Gurdjieff's work, I began to look for something else. It did seem a great deal more honest and realistic to look at people, including myself, as worthless or shit, as he put it, and then discern some small valid element in them. And to my surprise, it amounted to a more compassionate view of humanity as well. Instead of watching with a critical eye for signs of failure, I began to watch for signs of success, as one might be delighted when a dog learned a trick, rather than berating it whenever it failed to learn something. Whether or not this change in my attitude was what Gurdjieff intended is open to question. That was the effect it had on me, and it seemed to me that the effectiveness of the Gurdjieff work, or for that matter of any work of that kind, is necessarily determined by the receptivity of the person towards whom it is directed. Be that as it may, the conversation made my future association with the Chicago group, and with people in general, a much less disturbing and much more acceptable process. There was a short period during which the paradox of considering people shit, and thereby finding myself more in harmony with them, was confusing to me, but I did not puzzle over that for long. I was glad of the change, and that was sufficient. Our conversation ended that evening with a rather cryptic analysis by Gurdjieff of my association with them. Humorously, and apparently relishing some private joke, he said that the other people present were learning his work in a very different way than I had, and that because of my childhood association with him, I had certain problems and struggles which they would never experience. You do not wish to come see me tonight. You not wish to come see me tonight, he said. So necessary for me, very busy man, to take time to send to you. This because you now have struggle between real self and personality. You not learn my work from talk and book, you learn in skin, and you cannot escape these people. And he indicated the other group members. Must make effort, go to meetings, read book. If you never go to meeting, never read book, you still cannot forget what I put inside you when you child. These others, if not go to meeting, will forget even existence of Mr. Gurdjieff. But not you, I already in your blood, make your life miserable forever. But such misery can be good thing for your soul. So even when miserable, you must thank your God for you must thank your God for suffering I give you. Before Mr. Gurdjieff left Chicago, I had a private interview with him. I had been puzzled by his remarks about my special problems in relation to his work, and had not had any particular desire to pursue the subject further. I was tired of confusion, and his words had only added to my already perplexed state. But when he asked me to help him cook a meal in his apartment, I did not feel that I could refuse. As it turned out, there was very little work for me to do, and he spent most of our time alone together, asking me rather ordinary questions about my family, the work I did, and so on. It was reminiscent of being visited by some old relative who had deigned to take an unexpected interest in some younger member of a family. When we began to talk about the Chicago group, however, I made a rather impertinent remark about what I called their phony attitude towards his work, and particularly towards the so-called morality. Gurdjieff, who did not usually, in my experience, have any particular taste for opinions or gossip about his groups or his disciples, seemed very much interested in my remark and pressed me for details. I went on to say, with a good deal of self-righteousness, that I was leery of his group in Chicago on at least two counts, their phony reverence, as I called it, and their tendency to use his work as an excuse for sexual promiscuity, or at least a good deal of talk about sexual promiscuity. Being further prodded by him, I went on about their conception of morality seeming to me to be based almost entirely on sex and not on other customs. He smiled at this and then said, to my surprise, that he found this completely understandable. In fact, this is perhaps even good thing you tell me about group of people. America is still very young, strong country. Like young people everywhere, all Americans very interested, very preoccupied with sex things, so very natural for them to talk and act this way, and not bad thing they do. I tell many times that all work must start with body, like I tell many times that if wish observe self must start from outside, by observing movements of body. Only much later can learn how to observe emotional and mental centers. Young people not have very much inside, so not much to observe yet. And this is also a good thing. One of the reasons I come to America and have many American students. Europeans already know blasé, know everything, or think know about philosophy, religion, other such things. This not true. They only have already formed inner self that makes them rotten inside because formed with unconsciousness. Americans more receptive because not closed up inside yet. They naive, stupid perhaps, but still real. Americans particularly have more chance grow properly as men because have not yet become, like you say, phony men. For yourself, I tell always remember look for reasons that I cannot see. You already notice difference between American and European morality, but when make judgment must observe deeper if wish understand. I then asked him why it was that I felt so many of his students to be insincere in their interpretations of him and his work. He asked me to give him an example, and I said that they never seemed to me to listen to what he said, that is, the actual words, but that they almost always immediately placed an interpretation on such words, which was to me manifestly untrue. What you say is true, he said, but if you see this, then you must already begin to see how difficult this work. Other evening, when I tell that you learn differently from others, I tell truth. When you come priory first time, you not yet spoiled, have not learned to lie to self. Already even then you can maybe lie to mother or father, but not to self. So you fortunate, but these people very unfortunate. Like you, when child, they learn to lie to parents, but as they grow up also learn lie to self, and once learn this is very difficult to change. Lying, like all other things, become habit for them. So when I say even ordinary thing, because they wish have reverence for their teacher, this reverence can be very bad thing, but is necessary for their good feeling, and because also wish not disturb their inside sleep, they find other meaning for what I say. In that case I asked, how can they ever learn anything from you, or from anyone else? Maybe they not learn anything ever. Then why bother to try and teach them? He smiled indulgently. Because it is possibility, even if very small, may learn. It seemed logical enough, as he put it, but I doubted that there was much in store for most of the people who worked with him. After leaving his apartment, as I reviewed the conversation, I wondered whether I was making an exception of myself in the sense that I felt I was learning more, or at least something from him that his other students. Wait. I wondered whether I was making an exception of myself in the sense that I felt I was learning more, or at least something, from him than his other students. And I wondered if I was not feeling a little self-proud of myself. After turning the questions over in my mind, I could not honestly tell myself that I was in any way particularly vain about my learning. I was proud in a comparative way that I had known him personally so much more intimately and for so much longer a time than many of his other students. But as to any actual learning, I could not evaluate it for the very simple reason that if I was learning anything at all from him, I didn't know what it was. That did give me a slight clue, but not a very satisfactory one. The clue was simply that if one did acquire knowledge or learn something from him, it might not necessarily be visible or obvious.